Welcome to People at Work. I'm your host, Amanda Dundas. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Org Vitality CEO Jeffrey Saltzman on the pandemic's impact on employee work expectations. Jeff will be presenting on this topic at the United Nations High-Level Political Forum side event on July 12th. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Amanda. It's great to be here.
Do you think we'll see back to business as usual, or will organizations need to shift how they deal with their employees?
You know, that question comes up over and over and over. And, there's an old saying, the origins of which are a little bit disputed, but the old saying goes like this: you can't cross the same river twice. In other words, the world is always changing, has been, will be. And the idea of we're going to go back to the way things were is a little bit of a fallacy. So the world of work is always changing. The idea of going back is really a non-starter. The way it was doesn't exist. So the question is always not looking backwards to how do we duplicate what was, but rather, how do you go forward? How do you continue to attract the best and brightest? How do you make the products that you need to make for your business to succeed? What's your strategy? And if your strategy is simply to duplicate the past, you've got a failed strategy to begin with. The second, I think, piece of that, though, is that there are fundamentals of what people want out of the workplace, right? Things change, as I said. You can't cross that same river twice. But there are fundamentals of what people want that don't change. I've been around long enough, and I've been studying people at work long enough that, we looked at people after 9/11, we looked at people after the 2007 recession, and the fundamentals of what people want out of the workplace weren't changed by any of those. Things like equitable treatment or being treated with respect and dignity, for instance. These things are enduring. And just because we go through a recession or a pandemic or a technology shift, these fundamentals don't change. What may change, though, is the way you have to deliver on some of those fundamentals. And I think the third big important point in terms of will we go back to business as usual is that organizations have to avoid painting staff with too broad of a brush. In other words, let's send everybody back to the office. Well, that may work for some, but it may not work for all. And the risk you have when you paint with too broad of a brush, you treat everybody the same. And by treating everybody the same, you actually are not maximizing potential performance of the organization. You're sort of going in it with an approach that is certain to underperform your potential. In other words, you're really saying by a broad brush, some of the square pegs you have, you're trying to fit into round holes. And we know that just doesn't work.
Well, I don't want to be guilty of painting with a broad brush myself, but given that people have experienced a very different way of working during the pandemic, working from home, having more flexibility around their hours, do you think in general people want different things when it comes to their work nowadays?
Well, the answer would be yes. And the answer is yes in the following way. As I already mentioned, the fundamentals don't change, but the way you deliver on them do change. For instance, people want to be treated with respect and dignity at work, right? The definition of what is dignified may include the ability to work in a more flexible way now that people have experienced that, or to be able to work in a remote fashion, right? Because what people found is that they know it's possible, they know they could have been effective, and maybe they know they had better work-life balance by being able to do that. So now that they know it's possible, they may feel that they want the flexibility to be able to do that, right? Mandating things, possibly against people's will, like everybody back to the office, or everybody do this, or everybody do that, you're actually treating people with less dignity when you eliminate choices that they have. So, and that taking down their dignity after we've gone through COVID or in other environments, other challenges in the environment, that's just something that may not be acceptable to people anymore. They wanted to be treated with respect and dignity beforehand. They want to be treated with respect and dignity now. The nuances on how you deliver to that may in fact change because of what people have experienced during this COVID crisis.
So, what's the role of executive leadership today in dealing with employees during COVID?
It hasn't changed compared to what it was and what has been. In other words, the role is the same in terms of setting direction, communicating with staff. At this point in time, you can't over communicate with people. People abhor a vacuum of information. It causes extreme anxiety for them. So communicate, communicate, communicate. Let people know how they fit into the organization. Help people see the vision of where the organization is going and what it's doing to survive and thrive in this times of COVID. But during times of distress, it's even more important to keep in touch with people. It's tempting for leaders to retreat into the war room and strategize and plan because you're dealing with a crisis, right? And while that's critical, you want to strategize, you want to plan. It's just as critical for senior staff to get out in front of the employees with information. Providing information is one way of helping reduce people's anxiety, because what's very clear is that when there's a lack of information, people will fill in the blanks, and they will often fill in the blanks with something much worse than reality.
Everything still feels very uncertain, at least to me. How do organizations stay flexible with their approach to talent management right now?
Well, everybody wants to talk about post-COVID, right? And I'm located in New York, and it seems like we've turned the corner, but have we or not? What will happen with this Delta variant? So everybody wants to talk about COVID, but it's really not over yet. We may have a lull of COVID in places where there's high degree of vaccination. But the last time I checked, we still have a global economy with global supply chain, and the world can't spring back fully until we defeat COVID on a global basis. So while it's tempting to talk about post-COVID, but as we see with the Delta variant, especially in places with low vaccine rates, we're still at risk. While everyone is still at risk, while anyone is at risk, because this disease, unless we eliminate it on a global basis, is just going to rear its head again. If not the Delta variant, some other variant will pop up and wreak havoc. So we really need to stamp this out as a global effort for everybody.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us. To register for the United Nations event, please visit our website at orgvitality.com. And as always, thank you for listening.